Well, Andy, we are at noon and the recording has started. I'm just pulling up the agenda now to get started.
Yeah, we go ahead. Some people are away on either fire duty this week or at some training. So, yeah, I think we have what we have. Whenever you're ready, I will take this down.
Yeah. Just waiting on this agenda to load here, Andy, but I don't want that to be the reason that we don't start on time. Are you able to share the agenda on your screen and we can just work through it that way?
Yep, that works.
Great.
Yep, should be coming in right now.
Yep, it is. Great. All right, well, I'll get started. Welcome, everybody. It's a meeting of the Private Forest Accord Mitigation Advisory Committee, and we'll begin with a roll call and then approval of the agenda. So with that, Andy, can you call roll?
Yes, please respond in the affirmative if you're present. Chad Washington.
Here.
Bob Salinger. Kristen Regard.
Here.
Keith Curtis.
Here.
Brian Caparata.
Here.
Andrew Perkey. I think he's coming late, but we will mark that. Mark Stern.
Here.
Mark Randbreimer.
Here.
Jennifer Weichel's out on fire duty this week. Kate Wells is on a training this week. I do believe Sam's supposed to be filling in. I see Jeff. Are you filling in, Jeff?
I'm filling in for Kate and Sam, yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Chris Allen is away on a retreat, leadership retreat this week. Sarah Gregory. If she's also out on training this week. All right. All right, Chad, we can go forward.
All right, very good.
Oh, sorry, I just saw Andrew sign on. Andrew, I'm gonna mark you as present. Thank you. Sorry about that, Chad.
Yeah, no worries. All right, has everyone had a chance to review the agenda? All right, see heads nodding. So with that, unless there's any opposition, we'll just approve the agenda and move to the consent agenda, which consists of the meeting minutes from last meeting. Did anyone get a chance to review those? I see more heads nodding, so that's good. Again, unless there's any opposition, we'll just approve the consent agenda then and move into public comment. Andy, did we receive any written requests?
At this time, we didn't have any requests for public comment, but if anyone on the line wants to, now's an opportunity to raise your hand virtually. Hey, Chad, doesn't look like we have any. I'll hand it back to you.
Great. I'll just hand it right back to you for staff report, Andy.
Great. You guys should be seeing my slide coming in here.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Rearrange you guys here on my multiple screens so I can go right into it. All right. Well, thank you, Chad. Before we dive into the revisions and, oh, I'm sorry. No, that was just me. Before we dive into the revisions and recommendations for the upcoming fall solicitation, I just want to acknowledge once more the incredible response we had in our first year of our grant program. We received an impressive array of proposals from across the state, and unfortunately, we of course couldn't fund them all. But I am excited to see what comes in this year, especially with the proposed changes that we're going to be discussing today. It is crucial that our discussion today considers the needs of our applicants. Just kind of want to underline that as we go through the discussion, while also balancing our own goals. My hope is that today's outcomes will lead to meaningful revisions that make it an easy decisions for applicants to reapply this year. As you're aware, I've shared a detailed feedback document with all of you highlighting common themes from the applicants who responded to our survey earlier this year. The key takeaway was the need for an improved user experience and greater efficiency in the application process. This includes more intuitive, user-friendly interfaces, streamlined content, clearer guidance, and better consideration of timing. Sorry, guys, just muted some feedback there. Let's see, well, better consideration of timing, financial constraints, and actual budget needs to help get meaningful projects off the ground. That was my interpretation of most of the feedback. With that in mind, the 2024 grant guidelines and its appendices have been updated this year, incorporating feedback from applicants, reviewers, and our stakeholders. So I'll just dive right into it here. We'll start with the application questions. I'm hoping to go over this slide and the next one, which will be a review timeline. And then, Chad, I was just going to open it up for discussion at that point. So I was going to briefly touch some high-level changes. So starting with application questions, we've refined character limits based on last year's responses from applicants and also clarified certain questions from applicant feedback while trying my best to streamline that application. We've enhanced questions as requested from partners, the committee, and reviewer feedback, such as Endangered Species Act impact, better identification of project locations, funding criticalness of projects, enhanced descriptions of existing conditions, and more detailed project timelines being requested. One thing I am interested in this application is reducing the amount of questions in our application. If we could work to better streamline that, it would be very, very helpful. I think, to our applicants at the end of the day. I've done a few pass-throughs, but would really appreciate additional insight to what questions we may be able to eliminate or reduce ahead of this year's solicitation. We've also updated the monitoring plan template. This is very much an iterative process, and I expect the monitoring plan template to be fluid at least until the HCP is complete, but we did provide enhanced guidance this year as requested from our applicants. I am recommending to broaden our indirect costs to be more in alignment with OWEB. We increased indirect allowances, or I'm recommending increasing indirect allowances this year from 10 to 15%, which was a primary feedback from some of our applicants. We are now allowing for the following to claim indirect this year from applicants: 15% of personnel costs, supplies costs, equipment costs, and the category deemed other costs. We've incorporated additional applicant resources in this solicitation. We've provided some additional applicant resources for when proposals are built. We've linked previously funded projects in the grant guidelines along with our story map. We've also provided more clarity throughout the guidelines, such as a start date expectations being July 1st at best. Also added that proposals over $500,000 possibly being requested to present to the committee, as was requested last year. And I've clarified that grantees can ask for funding to cover direct project-related costs that may be required by our grant programs, such as increased insurance requirements. We've also updated our appendices to have common formatting and program branding throughout our entire guidelines moving forward. One last thing recommended is that reviewers provide more comments during the review process. So as you all know, we encourage applicants to seek feedback on their proposals to ensure transparency and help them improve for future submissions. To support this, we've added a comment box for each scoring area in the MAC review question. So when the committee undergoes the review, you used to only have to provide comments in overall comment box. We are now requesting you provide comments for each area of a review. This will help applicants better understand our program priorities and needs as they request feedback from me. This year, out of the 49 unfunded proposals, 15 of them have requested feedback. I expect that number to go up a little bit as we approach the solicitation. And as you all know, providing meaningful feedback is essential, and I believe that really starts with thorough reviewer comments from everyone involved in the process. I'm going to real briefly talk about the timeline. I know I'm throwing a lot of info at you guys, so I appreciate it. But I want to real briefly talk about this timeline and then kind of open it up at that point. Andrew, did you have a question before I moved on? Okay.
Well, I was just going to ask about the feedback, but let's hold off until we get to the questions. Like, what did you get? And, okay. Thank you.
This is pretty quick, but I appreciate that. I'll circle back. So overall, this timelines feel very similar to last year. I expect the same process, the same review worksheets. We are still using the same grant management system, so you guys should be very familiar with that, hopefully, or you will be. A few differences this year, which are, I am recommending a bit of a longer open solicitation period. Many of our grantees work in the field, and the longer period can give them more time to work on this grant proposal. That's also a big reason I try to get these draft guidelines out in summer so they have time to kind of download it even before we open up the solicitation. The review period is also longer than last year. So we've increased review timelines for the technical review teams. They will now have 2 to 3 regional team meetings to discuss proposals. This was requested by the reviewers last year so they could better understand local and regional needs while also obviously talking with their colleagues about the merit of a proposal. Stream bio presentations and reviews are due 1 month prior to the submission of the committee reviews. This was requested by the committee last year, so you guys could look at the stream bio presentations, send questions back and forth to them ahead of time. So I'm incorporating that into the process this year. And of course, we've also increased the committee's review period. So everyone has a little bit more breathing room this year. All that said, we are aiming for an April 2025 commission approval date. With an early March in-person MAC committee. I know it says late, but these dates are fluid. We are trying to anticipate when we need to deliver a packet to the commission. We're still working on that, but it does look like the committee will meet either mid to late March and commission will be mid-April-ish. Those dates haven't been decided yet. With that, I am gonna hand it back to Chad and happy to facilitate questions. I'm really looking for today, like I said, to get your guys' feedback on everything in this. So edits. Last year, one thing that was really helpful after the meeting, you guys sent me some of your revisions, some of the minor or edits or whatnot. Feel free to do that after today's meeting. Send me your edits on the documents you have. I believe I've given you Word documents. I will note the grant guidelines have undergone some revisions since I sent them out. I've caught some edits that needed to be changed, some confusing or conflicting dates that we've worked with StreamBios to fix. All right, that was a lot. Hand it back to you, Chad. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andy. I know Andrew had his hand up, and then we'll move to Heath.
Yeah, and I was actually asking about the inquiries that you brought in. What kind of feedback did you provide them?
I believe he was asking about the feedback that we provided to applicants.
Yeah, and what did they ask for? What was their inquiry?
Yeah. No, I'm happy to talk about that. And I apologize that I didn't send out a template to show you guys what that looks like. I wish I did now that I think about it. So how that process is, and I've also made it clearer in our grant guidelines this year that we do allow feedback. I've also sent an email to applicants who didn't get funded, encouraging them to request feedback. They have to request it for us to provide it. So they're send a simple request to me. They say their proposal name, how much they funded, some identifying info. I'll get it back to them, and it gives them 4 areas. So the first one's watershed context. The second one is clarity of proposal, and then alignment with PFA priorities. I summarize all the comments anonymously and provide it in a narrative form to them for each one. And they also get their score from the committee. Again, it's anonymous, but they see what each committee member scored them of the 2 committee members. Usually these reports and these feedbacks are about 3 to 4 pages long that they get. And they also get a copy of the scoring matrix. As of now, anyone who's responded back to the feedback has been positive. They've really appreciated the comments. They've really appreciated the effort to get them the detailed information back. One reason I wanted to incorporate more committee comments was that was just a little bit of lacking last year. So it would just help provide more clarity to them for the ones that want to reapply. Hopefully that answered your question, Andrew.
I mean,
Muted.
I'll just go with I don't mean to open a can of worms here, but like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Like like the scoring, for instance, we went through that process. I mean, this is not a mechanical process. Like the scoring implies a sense of precision that is not correct. And I think that the reason that some projects were selected and not others is because the ones that were selected, the committee liked better, right? Like they just were better projects according to the committee. And I fear Andy, that if you are trying to capture we may be asking a lot of you to try to capture the thoughts of the advisory committee members accurately. And I would hate to mislead the applicants. I am sure that two things are always true. One, that applicants always want to answer fewer questions. That will always be true. And two, that if they don't get a grant, they want to know precisely why they did not. And I'm not sure that because they want those things, that compels us to respond to those requests. I'd be interested in other people's thoughts, but I am a little fearful that your 4-page summary of why they didn't get it will cause them to modify their application in precisely the ways that you have described and then be angry when they don't get it the next year.
I appreciate that. And it's a summary of everyone's comments. It's not just the committee, it's technical advisory comments at the same time. It's a pretty standard practice to give the feedback to them, and there's a disclaimer at the top of the feedback document saying this is only for additional insight into your proposal. And it is pretty common practice to give them some feedback. I don't think they would expect them to automatically get funded the following year just because they met everything I said. Like what you said at the top of that, you have to draw a funding line.
Yeah. I know that
I think it's important to let them know that just because they fix or correct based on the comments, it's still subject to the other projects that are going to come in that they're going to compete with. That if they were to, as Heath says, fix everything, it doesn't mean they're now going to be awarded the grant.
And the scoring matrices are like to get us in the ballpark. That is my view. And maybe other people feel differently, but it'd be really neat if you could, boil life down to like 5 and 10 point scores, but it's messier than that. And it involved conversations between all of us as committee members and some trade-offs relative to other projects that may not replicate if the other projects were different. And so I don't know. I guess I only mean to encourage highly qualifying that feedback. And maybe that's enough.
It'd be interesting, Mark Grimbrenner, just to hear if you have any perspective on that from OWEB, because I imagine you sort of face a similar challenge there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to jump in, but I saw some other hands up. I mean, as Andy knows and the folks in the committee know, that when we were working on the application and the review process, I was always not a fan of having scoring, and that can boil down to, a number means something different to everybody. My 10 might be Heath's 5, and my 5 might be, Fran's 1 or 10. And so unless you really have that number really defined and explained well, so everybody's looking at the numbers the same, it's really hard. They're a good place for starting the conversation, but they get harder. As far as the is the feedback, I'm a big fan of feedback, and I think it helps folks really think about their project, especially if it hasn't been funded, a lot more clearer. As you write an application, you're probably the most familiar person with the project, and you're the closest to it, and you're going to make assumptions about it, and those assumptions a lot of times are going to be, hey, everybody is familiar with the project as me. And so getting some feedback back from folks that really helps people better articulate or think about their project is really helpful. As someone already noted, it is a competitive process, and every cycle you are going to be competing against new projects. That's just a given, and that's expected, I think. And then the reality is part of that, if your project is, even if you dial it in where you're still addressing all the comments and you've got it explained perfectly well, it just may not be, a project that, as far as a priority or as far as the footprint of the ecological uplift from that work, just may not compete well against some of the other projects that are coming in. And that's just the reality of it. As far as the length of the application or the questions, everybody wants a shorter application always. Applicants, reviewers, the people that make it. It all takes time to write, it all takes time to review, it all takes time to manage it overall. The reality is you have to look at the questions, and you have to make sure that in there you're getting the information you need for your statutory requirements, your OARs, or your review criteria. And then, make sure you're not being redundant in the questions as much as possible. So you're just asking those things that you really need to pull it out and only asking it once. And then at some point you can't make it any smaller or any more streamlined, or you're not going to get the information out that the reviewers need to really answer the questions about the ripeness or the technical merits of the project. So hopefully I got everything. There was a lot of questions in what Heath and others asked, so hopefully that was helpful.
Fran, you've got your hand up.
I do. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Mark said. I think that the numbers is tricky because also we only, as reviewers, reviewed a portion of each of the projects that come through. So, I have no idea what my scores would have looked like if I had been reviewing all of them. And I please believe on every level, I'm not suggesting that we all review all applications because that's an impossible task, but it does cloud those responses, I think. And I am also in favor of providing feedback, but I would want them to take it with all those caveats that everyone else has mentioned already. And then the only other thing that I remember from last year's process that I found really hard was that the presentations we were given leads us to a priority that is not necessarily our committee's priorities. They're ODF&W's priorities, and those may align, but they might not always align. And so I just want to make sure that we can hear from projects that we can allow time to request a presentation from a project that we as a committee may want to hear from that may not always align with everyone else's priorities, if I'm saying that clearly.
Yeah, that is clear, Fran, and a great point. I will also just say I'm a fan of the feedback, but the additional time may not give us as reviewers kind of more time, as you said, Andy, if we are moving from comments of the project as a whole to having explicit comments to each and every question asked. That is a different workload. And we may receive the same number of projects, or now that it's the first solicitation has been out, we might get twice the projects and have to comment on each and every box question that we are asked. It might be a considerably heavier lift. And with that, Heath, you had your hand up, and Mark, it looked like kind of at the same time. So we'll go.
Yeah,
Heath and
just
then
very quickly, I guess, Andy, I might, with all of that, I will defer to you guys and the professionals who do this more. I just meant to at least pose the question, how much do we need to give them? The final answer is that it didn't compete favorably relative to the other projects, and just, that is the answer. But I guess the one thing I really would discourage would be distribution of that spreadsheet that had like the scoring and stuff with like a line where the dollar numbers were and stuff. Like, I just, while that may be a useful conversation tool for us, again, I really feel that implies a sense of precision in the review process that is just not accurate.
Yeah, especially as we move projects up and down, above and below that line.
Yeah,
sorting them and considering trade-offs. Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to sort of go back to some of Andy's earlier comments about the grant guidelines. So I guess I would pause. My only comment on the review process is I think the conversation is good, and I think we identified kind of the strengths. I think the feedback is good. I did make comments in the other boxes, but I did that mostly for my own benefit, so I could remember what I was thinking about with that project, because you review them at one point and then we talk about them several weeks later. So for me, that was just helpful notes to myself to remember what I was thinking when I read proposal the first time.
Appreciate it. And one thing I forgot.
Want to respond to that?
Yeah, I appreciate it. One thing I forgot to mention is while there are comments in each of the 5 areas that you'll be reviewing, you can put no comment in that area. It is up to you. It's up to your discretion. One reminder I would make is that these applicants are our customers, and your guys' insight into their proposal is extremely valuable. It is so very valuable. But yeah, and I don't provide a whole list of funded projects also at the same time. It's just the scoring matrix out thereafter. But I really appreciate these insights. I've taken some notes and we'll take it back as we consider feedback. Thank you.
And Andy, when you're talking about comments for every question, is that the expectation of all of the folks that we had, the guest reviewers as well? Yes. Some of the guest reviewers had very thorough feedback and others just said, I'm just assigning a score.
Correct. So it'll be the same process. The technical review teams actually have a more in-depth review process and questioning that they have to answer. But yeah, it's the same thing. They're allowed to hit no comment on there or not. You just have to type no comment to proceed, which is acceptable too. But
I just know with some of those technical reviews, there were some that were quite technical and expansive in the description of the review, and others were stated that they are just going to give an overall project score, and that was the extent of the review. And now I see 3 hands up. I believe, Andrew, you were first, and then Mark, and then Heath.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. I'm actually interested to see what the decision of the groups that you responded to is with regards to this next solicitation, to see how they actually react to the feedback that they received. And so I would encourage you to keep a list of who you responded to, and then when we get the proposals, see if those people brought the same ones back or if they didn't apply. And because I do think a goal should be recognizing that we have a pretty broad frame here of the things we can fund, is to increase clarity of expectation from the community out there about, hey, does this project fit or not? So that we actually, in the future, get proposals for projects that really do, and we start to not see the ones for the projects that aren't such a great fit.
A great comment. Mark,
Fair.
you had your hand up.
Again, I was going to go back to some of the grant guidelines. So Heath, if you got something on this, what we're talking about now, you should go ahead.
I do. And then I will also have comments on grant guidelines too when we get there. I have some questions about that. But Andy, one additional thing is there was one reviewer last time that gave scores, but said explicitly, I am only reviewing these applications for these 2 different topic areas. And that kind of biased like the scoring. It worked weird, right? Because they were very satisfied or dissatisfied as to those 2 items they were looking at, but they weren't looking at the rest. Nevertheless, that score kind of carried through as a full weight score. And I would just discouraging that type of participation. Like if somebody's going to be scoring, they need to, well, I mean, maybe you're just using them for a particular purpose, but if that's true, their score should be treated differently. Like I would prefer it if reviewers did the full-throated review and they didn't abridge their review in a way that's difficult to capture or understand.
Yeah, agreed. So, Mark, it sounds like this is a good time for you to ask your question, and then we'll go back to Heath.
Yeah, guidelines, just 3 short questions. I think one, Andy, you said some of the feedback from the applicants was about consideration of timing. And I guess I wondered what that meant. Was timing in terms of the length of the application process, or the time of year that it was offered, or at the time, how long it took to get the money, or what was the specific concern about consideration of timing?
Thank you, Mark. When you pose a question like that, probably all of the above is the best answer there. Timing of the solicitation, we are working with other agencies, there's not much opportunity outside of we've scrutinized when we can offer this, and this is what we believe is the best time of the year to offer it. So we have some feedback with that because of the in-water work period, and the response was to widen the open solicitation window. That was my response. And then also to deliver these draft grant guidelines as soon as we can, which we did accomplish, because many of these applicants work during months ahead of the opening. Timeliness, of course, in terms of getting the agreements out, and we're working to streamline that. We expect to do even better next year to get them out the door. We've provided more guidance to the applicants in this coming solicitation so they better understand that July 1st should be their start dates at the very earliest. I think I answered your question a little bit there.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thanks. And the other one, you mentioned the indirect cost rate going to 15%, which sounds reasonable to me. But then you listed that it applied to certain things. Does it, like personnel or supplies, does that indirect cost not apply to certain things?
Yeah, that is correct. It wouldn't apply to contracts. So when they hire a contractor, you can't charge. It's not charging indirect on a contract. So usually, what happens is that contractor, it's within their own indirect rates or rates are all within their contract. So no, we don't. There's no indirect for contracts processing because we encourage the administrative person who's processing contracts to be on that grant. So if that's your program analyst or your project manager that's moving that contract through, they should have those hours in the grant on there as direct charging to process it.
Yeah, that sounds a little conflated to me, but because usually indirect costs are not people writing grants. Indirect costs are sort of the built-in operational costs of running a program. So I think, a grant person looking at what's an indirect cost, you would not put your grant administrator in the personnel, but
we have that. We've had a few that do that. I would do that. I'd put administrative assistants into it, whatever required to get it done. But yeah.
It sounds kind of convoluted, but I'm not going down that rabbit trail, so we'll leave it at that.
I'll note it, but thank you, Mark.
Andy, did we see in the last round of grants, can you just remind me, was everybody hitting that 10% allowance for administrative costs and personnel?
I don't have them in front of me, but yes, I believe most of them were doing it, correct. Unless they had a federal negotiated indirect rate, which we do honor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, just trying to get a sense of when we say we're going to increase those costs, which are, associated with the project, they're going to other things. 5%, we can very well expect that will all get sucked up in admin. If it was everybody was putting the 10%, we can expect everybody to add the 15%.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess, Andy, I'd ask one more question, and you and I talked about it a little bit offline, but can you remind, what are the dates going to be then for the technical reviews are finished and the window that the MAC team has to review the grants?
Of course. So
4.5 days, Mark, over between December 20th and 24th.
Perfect.
Yeah. So we have right now, if it doesn't change, pending when we need to deliver a packet to commission. So this timeline is subject to change. I have the review period starting December 1st through March 28th. The technical review period will be December 1st through February 28th. And then the committee review period, I believe, is in, I don't have my other timeline up, but it overlaps. It's from February to March, I believe, is the committee period. And I can get you, let me pull up my other. Real quick.
Do we start reviewing before they finish their reviews?
Yeah. Let me look up that timeline real quick. Because they're going to be wrapping up, the stream bios will be wrapping up their presentations, if I recall correctly. So that's why there's a little bit of overlap in that last part. It allows them to wrap up their presentations as you're starting your review. I'll get their presentations, deliver it to you guys, You can then get any questions you want, which was requested last year, and then bring them back to me, and I'll give them to the stream bios, and we can kind of have that back and forth for Q&A with you guys ahead of the meeting as needed. That's why there's a little bit of overlap in that.
So what's the period, what are the dates for the MAC review again?
Yeah, let me pull up my actual timeline just so I can give you the actual date. Just a second here. Okay. So if I have actually, yeah, February 1 to March 30. I'm going to be assigning reviews to the committee, yeah, first week of February. Now, that in-person MAC meeting might come up about 2 weeks, so that's to be determined right now.
Yeah, and I'm only asking in part because I think the sooner those dates are set, then we all have enough lead time to plan around it. But if it keeps moving, it's hard to know for sure where it's going to land.
Yeah, I heard that, and I expect to get those finalized in the next week here for you guys, and I'll probably send out a calendar hold for that exact thing. Thank you for that reminder. Appreciate it.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
So Andy, by December 1, we should know how many different projects or applications that we should be reviewing, correct?
Yes,
Whether it's
December 1,
similar to last year, twice as many as last year.
or a little, yeah, a little less. Yes, exactly. We will know by December 1 what that looks like. That's when I'll be assigning them to the technical review team.
Great, because to Mark's point, it's not just when do we start, but what is that workload going to be?
Mm-hmm. And then end of next week, I'll try to get you guys that calendar hold for the in-person, so we get that on your calendar at least. Another 2-day thing.
Great. Can you pull up the cover page again, Andy, of the draft guidelines?
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, and Chad, may I ask, like, in your view, where we are in the agenda relative to the draft guidelines? What's our plan? How are we going to talk about those today? Are we going to do a page turn? Or are we going to just kind of take questions and comments? What's the vision?
Yeah, I think we'll just take questions and comments, and we're not going to be moving to approve any of these today. We're just going to have open discussion, and then we'll bring this back up during the next meeting.
Great. Okay.
Andy, thank you for pulling this up, and this will lead us into the next agenda item.
Of course.
I guess my only feedback, this looks great. The cover photo, unless that's an example of take, you might want to reconsider the image in the upper right.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we're looking at
with
it.
that, I think we can move into the next agenda item, which is the guidelines themselves, correct? All right. So are there any comments just to get us started on these draft guidelines that were sent out?
I have an initial question, and then I have a number of comments in the document that we can talk about. But my initial question is, Andy, it would have been helpful, I think, to have a red line. Well, let me ask this. Did we publish a document that looked like this last year?
Yes.
It would have been helpful to have a red line to see what changed last year to this year. I am certain that some of my comments would have applied equally last year, but we can get to those. Can you describe to us generally where you made changes relative to what we published last year?
Yeah, based on that feedback.
So the biggest thing is going to be indirect changes, update to the appendices, giving more guidance in the appendice documents, monitoring plan updates, and then additional resources really along the lines of linking last year's projects so people get a better applicants get a better understanding of what was funded last year. Overall, it was not I'm going to try to get out of this screen. It was not a substantial change that I put in here. other than those. And if I'm being completely honest, there really shouldn't be too many surprises with that.
Okay. Well, if I may, I have just a few, and I am happy to defer to others too if people have set up questions.
Why don't you get us started, Heath, and then if
All
others
right.
have questions along the way, we can bounce back and forth between folks.
All right. Well, on page 1, in the second full paragraph at the end, there on the right, you can see that it talks about how at the last full sentence, I think it says this amount is slated to increase to $5 million once the HCP is finalized. And that it may work. I think it's important to note that it'll increase to $5 million once the incidental take permits are issued. That is to say, the HCP will actually be finalized well before that happens. You know, you draft your HCP and then you've got NEPA and your BIOPS and all the stuff. So that's that. My biggest comment probably is on the page. It has page 3 that has the implementation examples. And if I understand correctly, these are ordered in the way they are because it's alphabetical by virtue of the first word. I find that a little unfortunate because what word you chose to use on the first line dictates kind of where it exists in the list. And that strikes me as a little ad hoc. The private forest accord report itself has the principal examples. They're in 11.3.1.1, and it walks down through aquatic organism passage, wood augmentation, beaver conservation and reintroduction, wildfire resiliency, restoration treatments, and there's descriptions with each of these, and riparian thinning. And then there's a bunch of stuff in here that, like, in this list that's kind of like, I think they're fine, but like it's not terribly well thought out. So by way of example, like translocating species, the third to last one there, that's kind of hilarious. Like just translocating species, like moving an elk from one place to another. That wasn't really something we had included in the list. And I'm not offended by like generally like doing some other stuff here, but give some thought to this. I had an idea about how to approach this. One way would be to recount the stuff in 11.3.1.1 first, because that's kind of, where the negotiations and the authors were kind of focusing their attention. And then you could say other examples might include, and then you could use the rest of this list that you've supplemented here, and to give them some idea of what some of these other ideas may be. I just feel like that would be more true to kind of the PFA report. Otherwise, just provocatively, we're starting on the first bullet with conserving land. And fine, that's like, we can have that as another example, but I feel like that's kind of a mistake in the setup. And some of the others of these, like we've got one here for installing or upgrading stream road crossings to safely pass the HCP covered amphibians. I mean, I guess I think that's right. We haven't got a lot of information about that specific activity, whether stream road crossings are a limiting factor for amphibian conservation. Maybe it is. I only mean to suggest that it's kind of a little ad hoc and weird. If that's going to be included, I could think of like a million other things we could include. So I guess that's my piece that I would say. Like cold water refuge is another one. Like, and it's got a little bit of editorializing in here, right? It's like restoring cold water refuge critical to the survival and persistence of HCP covered species. Well, I'm not sure what that sentence is doing. It's like, is it saying that they are critical definitionally, or only those cold water refuge that are critical to the survival of the HCP covered species? I only mean to suggest this struck me as a little ad hoc and casual, and a way to bring it back to grounding may be to refer to the PFA report.
Thank you. And this was developed during the working group last year. But yeah, I will revisit and try to crosswalk there.
Okay. And then the next question is on stakeholder engagement. I'm so sorry here. If other people have concert questions as we go, I think that works. We didn't really get any of those last year. But maybe you could describe to me what your vision for that is. That wasn't one of the things in the PFA report, and I don't think I'm offended by this, but like I'm not sure who applies for this grant.
I believe the stakeholder engagement did come from the report, so I'm going to reference that and probably get back to you on that. Because it was a unique kind of stakeholder engagement from my interpretation, was that it was only to garner awareness for the grant program is what it was kind of trying to get at. So I thank you for noting that. I'll go back and look at that, but that's
Great.
where I believe it came from.
Okay, well, fine. And again, I don't think I'm offended by it. It's pretty wide open, and I'm not sure how I would grade a stakeholder engagement application. Plainly, our application draft that we've put together doesn't work for this. Like, they would have a million things that the questions you would be asking that this wouldn't respond to.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a unique in
Certainly
the
wouldn't
Senate
be
bill.
competitive against Habitat project.
All right.
Andy, can I just put a place marker out there too, that when we take this out to the public, that we need to have a dedicated effort to get this eligibility to tribal entities. That was a comment that we received. We need to make sure we're doing that.
Yes, and I'm happy to report that we are doing it. We'll be presenting at upcoming meetings, engaging with them. I've made an effort the last 6 months to double check, triple check, and come back and check again with our tribal colleagues. So it is top of the list, and we will continue to do that. Thank you for
Excellent.
highlighting it.
Great. Thank you, Andy.
Go ahead,
And then
Mark.
Mark Grimbremmer's got his hand up, and then we'll bounce back to you, Heath.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, we, in our grant program, we actually removed the word stakeholder. We just use engagement. There's a negative connotation with stakeholder in indigenous communities. So we, out of respect for that, we pulled that word from our grant offering.
I appreciate you bringing that
Helpful.
up. That's crossed my mind too.
Like public? Just, I guess we can just say engagement. It's fine.
We just use the term engagement. It, could refer to engagement in the OWEB context really refers towards those actions that are necessary to bring landowners to restoration. And so when we review an application for engagement, there has to be a really clear path from the actions that are proposed in the engagement to actual on the ground restoration. And if that linkage can't be made, then usually the project does not get recommended because it doesn't meet that threshold.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, like when I had thought about stakeholder engagement, years ago when we were talking about this first, my vision was like one of the neat things that, like the Freshwater Trust and stuff has done is they've built models that said, hey, and the Wild Salmon Center's done this too. Here's where we think we can get our best ecological bang for the buck. And it had always occurred to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to just like wait for somebody to show up and say, hey, I've got a restoration project in this area that's really valuable. It'd be better if we knew there was an area that was really valuable if we went and engaged them, right? And said, hey, you should participate in this. We want to spend some money here because we think we would get the most ecological return for investments in this geography. And that maybe this money would go toward that. But I don't know how that fits in your process, Andy. And again, I don't know how anybody would apply for one of these stakeholder engagement grants given the application form we've prepared.
Mhm.
So my next one is on page 6, incidentally. I like the, I guess, oh, your 6 is different than my 6. It's in section 2. So if you scan down, there you go. The bottom there, there's no minimum or maximum, although most projects are expected to request at least 50,000. Proposals requesting more than 500,000 should be prepared to present to the PFA MAC in person meeting in fall. And is that true? Is that our intention is in the fall? I like all of this. I didn't know we had like settled on these numbers, but isn't it the case that we would want them to come present to us in the spring?
Yeah, that's a mistype. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
I don't have a lot more. My next one's on what is my page 9, but it's the first page of section 3. Yeah, so here you can see in the middle of the page, it says, the advisory committee advises the commission and ODF&W on grant expenditures from the PFA grant program. The advisory committee also reviews and selects projects to recommend to the commission for funding based on Exhibit G advisory committee scoring matrix. None of your attachments are styled as exhibits, and none of them are titled advisory committee scoring matrix. Is this the Appendix E that?
Score sheet.
Yep, that will be. I'll have to update that. Thank you.
Am I correct though that that's what that is?
I have to look at it, but yeah, it's the scoring matrix in the appendices. So that, yeah, because at one point it was called exhibits last year and we changed it. So that was an oversight of mine. But yeah, it would be the scoring matrix. And I think that should say, I can soften that language in reference to or something like
Yeah,
that.
that's right.
Is what
I'd
I'm
like
thinking is
that.
better. Okay.
Thank you.
But thank you for that. That was a mistype.
My next one's on the next page. Again, I'm sure this is not how you anticipate this is going down. I'm so sorry if I'm soaking up time from folks. You've got like these. Yeah.
Yep. What page?
Your next page here. See that where it says down there, stage 1. It's pretty harsh. The second bullet there, it says, incomplete applications will be disqualified from the funding round and returned to the applicant with an explanation. Like, would it be possible? I could envision a circumstance where we encourage them to turn it in a couple weeks early just so Andy can confirm whether they have everything required, and so that they don't lose like a whole year inadvertently because they missed some form
or question or they
or
were
question.
One,
answering you and coming back to one and they forgot to go back to it.
That is very true. You are correct. Although applications are considered complete at time of submission, and there's a disclaimer at the application that when they hit submit, that is their formal submission of the proposal. If they do not fully fulfill all the requirements of this grant program, there's people that submit at 11:59 at night and might forget something and come back at 12:15 to me that next morning, 30 minutes later or 15 minutes later. It wouldn't be fair and equitable to be able to open it up for a minor edit or revision.
Yeah,
although
I
do
get
understand.
it. But I think it may be a way to like soften it a little. Maybe if you turn it in early, we'll do our best, or we'll make an effort to review to ensure it's complete prior to the deadline, for 2 weeks earlier or something. I would just hate to have somebody's application disqualified on a technicality. That would be like the story of my life.
It's happened to me, and it's bummer, but I double, triple, and quadruple check what I submit moving forward.
All right, like my 5th grade teacher, he hated me. So,
but
my
it's
next
true that we could
Keith,
say,
I like your suggestion.
Yeah, the end is the end, and that's fine, Andy, and we can be quite firm on that. But if someone were to submit their project a couple weeks prior, could we have any opportunity to let them know, hey, this is incomplete? And
I
that
would
we
have
would
to do
consider
it.
all submitted applications complete at the closing rather than at submission?
I would have to do it for every application. So if they submit at 11:59 to be fair and equitable in the process, I would have to give the same opportunity to the person submitting.
Unless you said you would only facilitate a completeness check if they submitted it 2 weeks early.
Not everyone has the opportunity to submit it 2 weeks early, and that could be seen as not, as unfair and biased.
I get what you're saying, Heath. I totally do. And you think about these things, and it made me think of the Olympics and how, our athlete lost the bronze medal 4 seconds late on the. But I'm with Andy on this one. Like, I think we can't take that on. Like, we have to be pretty rigid in those requirements, I think, in order to make it fair for everybody. Because somebody might be, I don't want to, if I'm rewarded for being more organized, like, I don't know. I don't think that works.
Okay. Well, fine. I've said
It's just my
piece.
opinion. It's just one opinion out of all of
piece.
them. But I'm like, oh, this feels like we're getting into some weeds here that are hard to manage and not fair. And I can see poor Andy at 11:59 trying to review an application and give somebody an opportunity to fix it at the deadline. And that doesn't seem very fair.
I don't know why anybody couldn't turn in one 2 weeks early. I don't know what structural impediments there are to doing that. That seems weird.
I don't. I didn't have my reviews done until 11:59 when they were due.
Human nature is the structural impediment.
And
give me the deadline. That's what I work with.
Also, many of our applicants do submit more than one grant application. Overlap happens quite often with these grant applications, especially outside the in-water work period. So they're probably.
My advice to applicants is to put your binder together with your application and go sit down with Andy at lunch and make him put his eyeballs on it before the deadline.
Yep. It's highly encouraged.
Yeah. So my next one is in stage 2, though. Here you can see it says the regional review teams will evaluate project proposals based on the review team evaluation worksheets in Appendix E. I think that is the scoring matrix, but because I opened that document and I looked at Appendix E, is what we were talking about before, this Exhibit G Advisory Committee scoring matrix, a different document?
I believe I combined the scoring matrix into one big one. So it has the committee and it has
like all the different categories and like the 5, 5, 5, 10, 10.
Yeah, I think I just made it one big because I realized there's multiple attachments for people to look at where they're reviewing or where they're getting scored. So I believe I combined.
So you just correct the one above.
Yeah, correct. But thank you for bringing. I'll double check that. But thank you for bringing that up.
What's interesting about that, though, is that in this stage 2, you style it the review team evaluation worksheets in Appendix E. But then in the very next one, it's also Appendix E evaluation worksheets. And I think you really actually only have one set of evaluation worksheets.
Yeah, I'll fix that. That was a control replace error.
Yeah. And if you look in the very next, in stage 3, it makes reference to it too.
Okay, thank you.
Rest of this.
Andy, once you get these revisions completed, can you send them back out to the full committee for a reread and just make sure that there's no other issues like this? And if there are, then shall we just email you directly?
Yes.
Yeah. So the appendices are all linked at the end of the document, and that's where I found that Appendix E evaluation worksheets, and I followed that link. With my sincere thanks for accommodating my questions, that was all of the markup I had.
Thank you.
Very helpful, Heath. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns with the guidelines as written? Okay. Andy, when you're done there, if you could bring our agenda back up, I'm still having a hard time getting that to load.
Of course. Oh, I guess I am too. if no one has it, Chad, we're at closing.
I have it. I can share my screen.
Great.
Use a different application. Let's go there. How's that?
Perfect.
Very good. Oh, look at that. It looks like we are at committee closing comments and meeting wrap up. So with that, welcome any other comments from the committee.
I just wanted to reiterate, Chad, one more time that please, I will send these red lines out, but also please, if you have other edits, send it to me again. I'm happy to get those in there. I'd like to get your edits by the end of this week, please. Because then I'll send something out ahead of next month's meeting, and I do want to post stuff. And then just a quick reminder.
Another way of saying that is by tomorrow.
Oh, geez. How about let's expand that a little bit? How about next week? Let's do next. What are we at? Let me look at the calendar real quick.
Maybe end of day Tuesday.
Yeah, let's do end of day Tuesday. I'll put that in my notes. That'd be very helpful. And then please, if you have time to look at that application, I know it's very hard to view it and we are limited by our technical abilities. But if we can think about streamlining those questions, it'd be very helpful. Thank you. Thank you for the revisions today.
Andrew, you've got your hand up, and then Heath.
Yeah, Andy, could you remind us of the status of the terms of the different members and who's going to be part of the next review?
That was going to be, to that point, I was going to make a comment, but go ahead.
Okay, cool.
Let me make a quick note. End of day Tuesday. Get edits back. Sorry, guys, I'm just making a note so I don't give you a different deadline than what I just said. Yeah, so we have Heath and Kristen's term coming up for expiration as of September 30. Would you like me, Andrew, to kind of just go through the length of the remaining?
I guess it was who might not be here that I was curious about. So yeah, you don't need to go through everybody else's. And what's the next step for the two of you?
Are you asking in terms of process for replacement or where?
Or are they staying on? Are they moving off? And what's our process for replacement? I know Heath, you're on the Board of Forestry now, right? So yeah.
Yeah. So I do have some closing comments on that count, but Andy, why don't you discuss the mechanics?
Yeah. So we're in the middle of making a governor's recommendation. The governor will be reappointing. So we're working with the governor's office for next steps, and we're trying our best to get the new committee members online by October 1 is our goal.
And new being neither Heath nor Kristen.
Correct.
Yeah. So to that point, one, I just wanted to say I've really enjoyed an opportunity to serve on this committee, and I've really enjoyed seeing Kristen, you and I, the work we put into this chapter kind of come to fruition, and it really happened. And I kind of had a couple thoughts. If this is going to be my last meeting, which I think it is. One thought I had was that we've got some projects funded. Andy, you've got like the storyboard I found that is really neat, and it kind of shows where all those projects are in the state and has the write-ups, but please help sell the value of these investments in the Oregon legislature. I know that you walk behind the governor and the governor's priorities, but if this program is going to persist, and frankly, if the whole PFA is going to persist, we've got to make sure that everybody understands the value of these investments and the neat things that we're doing with the mitigation money. And so to the agency and to the fellow committee members, I sincerely hope that you might have some time for some outreach to consequential politicians and substantiate that we're excited about this process and these investments. And I say that notwithstanding the fact that I've had a little bit of friction with some of you on the nature of the investments and where we think the priorities ought to be. But I trust it's in good hands and look forward to that. The other thing, and maybe this is just on a personal note that I thought I'd leave folks with, is I personally had hoped that this would be a body where conflicting interests may come together to know each other and kind of play Santa Claus a little bit and have like a good experience. And I really want that to happen. I really think that this is a good venue for the environmental community and for the timber industry to meet regularly and build relationships, if not friendships. And I only mean to suggest that Zoom calls aren't always the best place to do that. And I would encourage meeting personally. And honestly, it occurs to me after the last round of investments that we should probably have an opportunity to host or get together with some of our grant recipients. Like there's a whole group of people who are also similarly invested in these outcomes with us. And I think it would be neat if we had an opportunity to break bread with them as well. But in any event, and with full knowledge that I have talked a whole lot this meeting, I just wanted to say thank you very much for letting me participate. And I've been genuinely flattered. You're doing great things, and I look forward to the next round of applications and your investments.
Thank you, Heath.
If I could as well follow up, thank you so much for the opportunity to work with all of you. I'm hearing some feedback, so hopefully I make sense through here. This has been one of the most fun things I've gotten to do in my career, is to see this program come together. It's all in the proactive, moving us forward, finding really neat ways to invest funding to uplift these places that we all care deeply about. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. Thank you to all of you that are going to take the reins and keep this program running and moving forward. I look forward to being somewhat less encumbered by my participation here, so I can be a full-throated advocate for the budget needs and the things that have to happen to sustain this really important program. So thanks for the work that each and every one of you do. And I'm really excited to see where this goes in the coming couple of years, and check back in on the projects that we've invested in. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you both for all of your perspectives. And Kristen, I just want to say another additional thank you to you as vice chair, and all the support and the offline phone calls, sharing your perspectives. It's been really helpful, and I have learned a lot personally from those conversations. So thank you for putting in that time and stepping up to that role. Sarah, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, if that's okay with you, Chair. And
Yeah.
for the sake of the public meeting, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Sarah Wright. I'm the Habitat Division Administrator here at ODFW. And I help Andy oversee this grant program. And just if this is the last meeting for Heath and Kristen, I'm glad I was able to attend and just express my deep appreciation to you both for volunteering an incredible amount of time. We built something from nothing, which was a massive lift. I actually have been chatting with applicants who are seeking to replace you, and it gave me the opportunity to reflect on what an easy job they get to slide into now that you did all the hard work. I think the reason why it was so successful is because you both, as well as the rest of the committee members, sort of set aside any baggage, to Heath's point, and figured out how we set up a program that'll be successful in really moving the needle for conservation. And there were a lot of things you had to make decisions on, a lot of things you had to review and modify. And I feel like we're in a really great place with this program, due in large part to all the time and really thoughtful participation that you both offered, and that all of the committee offered. But just wanted to extend my personal thanks to you both. And footnote on the advice from, because this is my role, but footnote to on the advice that Heath gave that we go advocate in legislature. Please, existing committee members, remember that we can't be lobbying. But there's also other people listening in on this meeting, and now you all are stepping off of this committee, which puts you in a different place. But we will continue to do everything we can as an agency to just tell the story of the good work that we're doing and allow others to carry that ball. So thank you very much.
But to be clear, Sarah, every committee member can lobby legislators for those funds, just not as a representative of the committee.
That's correct.
Yeah, just following up. Thank you both. I learned a lot from both of you. Also recognized a degree of deference and maybe dependency I've had for the two of you being in the trenches on this whole thing. And so a takeaway for Mark and Chad and Fran and Bob and me is, we've got a gap in terms of institutional knowledge. Chad and Fran, I'm not sure how much you were involved in the origin of it, but we're just going to have to be cognizant of some of that loss and step up, I guess, in terms of the roles we play. But thank you both.
Yeah, Chad, you're muted, but I think you were giving me a nod. But I just wanted to second my thanks and appreciation to both Kristen and Heath for your involvement, engagement, and your leadership here. And Heath, I really appreciate your comments. I hope too this forum can continue to grow and be sort of a positive forum for all sorts of voices to come together to work through the challenges that we all face in the state of Oregon. So, and I think you're moving into obviously a lead role with the Board of Forestry, where you can help echo the value and the worthwhileness of the PFA process as it goes forward too. And Kristen, I'm sure you'll weigh in on that as well. So thank you both. It's really been great.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again, Heath and Kristen. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
With that, we can adjourn.
Yep. Kristen and Chad, I think we're going to have a chair meeting after still.
Nicely done finishing early, guys. Yes. See you later.